Well, good morning, everybody, and yes, there is no electricity at our building again. We are going to do some serious research in getting a generator. This is the third time in 3 years, but we'll check into that. Anyway, so we're back to doing this at my house, and I thought we'd start off with a song, as we usually do. And I picked this song because it kind of speaks to the uncertain times and the ups and downs of life a little bit. Good morning again. Happy November and happy time change. This week we experienced the earliest ice storm on record in Oklahoma. I don't know if any of you lost electricity. Hopefully you have it back on now. We were lucky to have electricity, but we did have some really big limbs fall in our backyard and knock over the fence and another tree and so forth. Lee and Naila also had some tree damage. Well, I don't think that many of us would argue with this. 2020, the worst year ever. I don't know what's next. Maybe a plague of killer bees or the Earth getting hit by an asteroid. Halloween was kind of a bust last night. Did you know what the most popular costume was this year? Of course, Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin. Well, the biggest news, of course, is the election this week. Although it seems like not everyone is excited about the candidates. We have the two oldest candidates in American history. Biden is 77, Trump is 74, and you know who else is 74 years old? George Bush, who was elected in 2000, and also 74 years old, Bill Clinton. He was elected in 1992. So we have some older candidates running, and I know that a lot of people are really concerned about the election and the aftermath of what might possibly happen, rioting and violence and so forth, and this is a very trying time in our nation, and we should pray that God's blessing will be on our country. Well, right now, Jana's going to come up and talk with you for just a moment.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry we can't all be together at church today, but no electricity, all of those things that Russ just mentioned. But at least we get to communicate this way. Well, I just have a few announcements that I want to mention. The first thing is, as you know, Tuesday is Election Day, and I know it's been much anticipated. Anyway, teaching at OU has been very interesting this semester. We actually have Election Day off, so our campus is closed so everyone can go and vote. So I wanted to share something with you guys that I am also sharing with my students, and here's what it says. It says, love people who look like you, think like you, love like you, speak like you, pray like you, vote like you, love your neighbor. And then also this next one, and this one is, do you know what I'm going to do the day after the election day if my candidate loses? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to work, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to live my life, love others, and if my candidate does or doesn't win, I'm going to do the same thing regardless. And that's what I'm telling my students, and that's going to happen with some of us in our church too, because people have different opinions, and that's the route that our family has decided to take, because we can't change the outcome. So we're just going to love through it, and anyway, looking forward to that. Okay, well, moving on, as you know, Halloween was last night, and we have some very interesting things to show you. I wanted to take a quick vote on which costume you like best for me. I taught class this way last semester. I walked in, no one knew it was me. So I have Boomer, that's one. And then I just have, just the face mask, because it's a mask, it's Halloween, so Seeker. Or I have the one that Russ loves the most. This is how I usually look when we go out on a date. So anyway, cast your vote, and there'll be a big prize for the winner. Speaking of prizes, Tony Craig and his new little family won second place at a Halloween costume contest. And I don't know if you guys recognize what this is, but it's the Addams family. And this is his lovely bride, Heather, and the two daughters. And then, of course, Tony is Gomez, and I think that's cousin It down in the corner. So, good job, you guys. Great job on winning that Halloween contest. Okay, well, Russ mentioned a little bit earlier about doing a talk outside of the series that we're in right now. And that's what we're going to do today. We did want to mention that you're probably going to see a big difference in the quality of the video, because this is a talk from a while back, and it'll make you appreciate what we've done now. Anyway, with this particular talk, he wanted to show this one because of our current situation, and we just think it will be really good to help us get into the right frame of mind for what's coming up with the election. With everything going on, because there is a lot of uncertainty in our world. He's going to finish this series next Sunday, and we'll finish up the Game of Life series as he does that last talk. All right, one last thing I want to mention. Many of you guys know Liz Tiffany. She's been coming to the church for quite a while, and we caught her recently and asked her what she's up to. And here's what Liz said.
Hi, I miss everyone at church and seeing everyone, but I've been staying home because I have some underlying conditions, and I was not even seeing my family for the first couple of months. I would sit outside my daughter's fence to see my grandkids, but I'm past that, and I'm back at work for the last month, so I'm slowly kind of getting over it. But anyway, hopefully soon I'll be back and be able to see everyone. That Russ and Jana had for us that haven't been coming to church, and I really want to say thanks for that.
All right, well, obviously we can't collect the offering right now, but we would like for you to still participate in the offering. You can mail that in, you can drop it off at the church building. Any way that you can to get it in, that would be great. Russ is going to do a giving update in the newsletter that you'll be receiving too, and that way you'll know how things are going. But please make sure you do that, because we need that to support our missions, to help our ministry to keep going. So very important. Okay, next part. Okay, this is Mike Moore. Shut up.
Chris
He
is
just-
gonna spend all night
He's
editing
just
crap.
hanging out there. Next, we're going to hear from Mike Moore, who I wish I had married. Mike. Okay. Okay. Because he's so kind and patient. All right, next we're going to hear from my favorite singer, Mike Moore, and he is going to sing Blessed Be the Man. So let's hear it from Mike.
This is Psalm 1. It's a song that was done by the Sons of Korah, and we're going to do it. Mike's going to sing.
Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. Blessed is the man who doesn't stand in the sinner's way, or sit in the seat of the mockers. Blessed is the man. Blessed is the man. Blessed is the man, and that man for his delight is in the law of the Lord. Blessed is the man, that man who meditates on the word both day and night. And he shall be like a tree that's planted by the streams, which yield its fruit in a season. Whatever he does will prosper. All he does succeeds. His leaf will not wither. Not so the wicked. They will be like chaff that the wind blows away. That the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked man in judgment will not stand, nor the sinner in the assembly of the righteous. God watches over the way of godly men, way of the wicked, they will perish. Blessed is the man, or that man for his delight is in the law of the Lord. Blessed is the man, or that man who meditates on the word both day and night. the man. Blessed be the man.
Thing. Today we're talking about what to do when you face the challenge of a difficult or seemingly impossible situation. This is the final week in our series on lessons from the life of Moses, and it's been my hope that we've been able to learn some valuable life lessons from a guy who seemed like many of us, he had to learn lessons the hard way. My hope is that we would learn from his failures and so avoid, those heartaches. And at the same time, we would learn from his successes. And so we can enjoy similar successes in our lives. In week number 1, we looked at Moses, the events surrounding his childhood, and concluded that lesson number 1 from the life of Moses is that God can take a difficult childhood and other confusing or heartbreaking events and circumstances beyond our control, literally anything and everything that happens to us, and he can cause them over time to work for his purposes and for our ultimate good. Lesson number 2, God gives us a free will. And with it, we can choose self-will or God's will. One choice leads to failure and or a wasted life, and the other choice leads to God's blessings on our lives. Then last Sunday, lesson number 3 from the life of Moses was this. God often uses certain experiences in our life, in Moses' case, the burning bush, to get our attention and to change the course of our lives. Well, today we're in Exodus chapter 4 all the way to chapter 15, but it's not going to last very long, just to, assure you. Let me summarize it kind of like this. God calls Moses to return to Egypt to be his representative to face King Pharaoh and, convince him to allow the 2 million Israelite slaves to go free after 400 years of slavery. Moses hedges. He comes up with lots of excuses, but finally agrees. He travels from Midian to Egypt, somehow finagles a hearing before King Pharaoh, who scoffs and says, "No way, now beat it." So God begins sending the infamous plagues. Frogs everywhere, locusts everywhere, boils breaking out, livestock dying, rivers turning into blood, 10 plagues in all. Finally, Pharaoh has had enough, and so he gives in, lets the Israelite slaves go. So Moses organizes all the people, and they head out toward the promised land. Well, shortly thereafter, Pharaoh had a change of heart. He's like, our 2 million slaves that do all the work are leaving. This is not going to go very well for my country. And so he calls out the cavalry, and he says, "Go get them." And so they charge out. And of course, they have no trouble quickly catching up with the snail's migration of 2 million Israelites on foot. And when the people looked back and realized what was happening, they began to fall apart at the seams. They're approaching the banks of the uncrossable Red Sea. The Egyptians are fast approaching from behind with obvious evil intent. This has the makings of an old-fashioned slaughter. Well, in Exodus chapter 14, 10 through 12, the people expressed their fears and confusions as to why this is happening. They said, why were we even brought out of Egypt? Only to be massacred in the desert. Being slaves was lousy, but at least we were alive. And we can all sympathize with that feeling. But I want you to notice something in these next few verses. It says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. Now, who does it say was leading the Israelites? Twice, in 2 verses, it says that God was leading them. Then it says, after leaving Succoth, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. But by day, the Lord went ahead of them with a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night, in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar or cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. Again, who's leading them? God is clearly leading them. Now look at chapter 14. It says, then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near some town I can't pronounce, between Migdol and the sea. They are to be encamped by the sea, directly opposite Baal-zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. God has led them, but look where they end up. They end up in a dead end. It's like a cul-de-sac. There were mountains to the north, mountains to the south. The Egyptian army is bearing down from the west, and in front of them in the east is the Red Sea. And they're thinking, this is it. I mean, we are history. We're sitting ducks. It's going to be target practice for these Egyptians. There's nowhere we can go. There's nothing we can do. Again, remember, God led them there. And he didn't lead them into this dead-end cul-de-sac by accident. It was by God's plan. But why? Well, I believe it was to test them, to use this predicament to show them that God can take a seemingly impossible situation and miraculously work things out. So that in the future, when they were faced with other seemingly impossible situations, they wouldn't cave into fear or confusion. Rather, they would remember when God did that before? That was crazy. It was impossible, but somehow God pulled it off. And then they would trust him in the future. So let me ask you, what Red Sea, what seemingly impossible situation are you currently facing? For some of you, it might be your job. Your job has just become unbearable. Maybe it's the actual work, maybe it's some of the people you work with, maybe it's just the atmosphere, and you change jobs in a heartbeat. But there are lots of complications. It's not that easy to just quit one job and take another job. Perhaps some of you, your seemingly impossible situation has to do with your marriage. You know, you want to do what God wants you to do, but it's not a happy marriage. Things are not working. There are problems. Things have happened in the past maybe that have affected it. For others of you, your Red Sea that you're dealing with is a family issue with your children, or maybe with your parents, or siblings, or adult siblings. Seemingly impossible situations range from being a single parent to serious health problems, to trying to break long-standing bad habits, or trying to recover from deep emotional wounds. I mean, those are all struggles that are very real. And if the truth were known today, a large percentage of the happy, confident-looking people you see sitting around you here have at least one major challenge, one seemingly impossible situation staring them in the face right now. Now, we all do the best we can to kind of hide these things from each other. Not going to ask for a show of hands or call out for anyone to stand and share with everyone what your current situation is, the way Jan and I did a moment ago. But I would like to ask you in your own mind to identify, what is the Red Sea? What is the seemingly impossible situation that you're up against these days? Might be a really big one. It might be a relatively small one. But what is it for you? If you just brought that up on the movie screen of your mind now, what could you just name it? It's this. Could you name that in your mind? Think about it. What is your Red Sea? What is your situation that seems unresolvable? Well, with that in mind, I'd like to ask you, how did it come about? In other words, what was the cause? What brought about your seemingly impossible situation? Well, I think there are several possible explanations as to why these kinds of things occur. One, as we sing today, sometimes God intentionally leads us into situations that are difficult that we don't understand. Maybe to test us, our character, our faith, so that when he proves faithful this time, we'll trust him the next time. So maybe God led you. Sometimes, second, we bring those dilemmas upon ourselves. That is, we make ill-advised decisions, perhaps self-willed decisions instead of God's willed decisions, and bring these bad things to our lives. Number 3, I think sometimes things just happen that we don't necessarily understand at all. Not really our fault. Doesn't seem like it's something God would lead us into. But an inevitable fact of life is that no one is just going to cruise through life without some occasional adversity or challenges. But whatever brought about your seemingly impossible situation, remember, God is not surprised. God is not perplexed by your Red Sea. He's not up in heaven wringing his hands going, oh, now what? I have no idea what to do in that situation. No, in fact, God often uses, even if he didn't bring it about, he often uses those situations to become turning points in our lives. Turning points. Red Seas, seemingly impossible situations, are often when God does his best work in our lives. You know why? Well, partly because when all is well, we tend to become kind of self-sufficient. But when the roof caves in, when life gets really hard, we suddenly are a lot more open, a lot more sensitive to what God has to say to us, right? I sometimes think God uses those things to slow us down enough to look to him and to rethink how we're living or what's going on. So seemingly impossible situations can prove very beneficial if we will allow God to use them to change our lives, if need be, to strengthen our character, smooth out rough edges, whatever. Well, the last thing I want to mention is how to face the Red Seas in your life. How do we face them, both current and future? Well, number one, when you're facing a seemingly impossible situation, it's so tempting to be filled with anxiety, to be mean to the people around you who had nothing to do with it. Instead, lean on God. Look to God for help. The Bible has an undisputed truth in Proverbs 12, verse 25. It says, an anxious heart wears a man down, or a woman, or a young person. We all know that to be true. An anxious, worried-filled heart, it just drains you emotionally. But there's a better way. Jeremiah 33:3, God says, call to me, and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things. God will fight the battles of all those who aspire to obey him and trust him. In God's time, and in the right time for you, he will part the waters of your Red Sea situation. But he usually doesn't part those waters until he has used that seemingly impossible situation to do a work on you. We're saying, come on, God, part the water. It's up to my waist. It's up to my chest. It's up to my neck. And he's saying, I will part the water, but first, I want to chisel away a rough area of your life. Or I want to teach you an important life lesson. Or I want to draw you closer to my heart. Then I'll part the water. That's the first thing. Second thing, and how to face Red Seas in your life, is to face them with courage and confidence. Now, a lot of us here grew up playing baseball as little kids, or had a brother who did, or kids that did. And they do things differently now. They didn't have T-ball and stuff when I was a kid. But now they break it all up. They have kids that, 4 or 5 years old, and it's called T-ball, and there's no pitching. They set the ball on a cone, and a kid comes up and just tries to hit the ball, right? Then there's what's called control pitch. And each coach pitches to his own team. And each batter gets 5 pitches, and you can swing at all 5 of them. There are no strikeouts. You just, and you can't walk players because coaches would be cheating and walk their own players in for runs, right? So there's no walks. There's 5. You can and they just swing and hack and chop at everything because you get 5 chances no matter what happens, right? They're really aggressive. The next level up, older kids start doing the pitching. Well, they're just starting out. They don't have hardly any control, and so this is a walk-oriented league. Every kid walks up to the plate, and they just stand there. They're not going to swing for anything because there's no way that pitcher's going to throw 3 strikes before he throws 4 balls, and they just walk in. Well, what's the difference? Well, in one league, the kids are aggressive. They're swinging. They're giving it all they got. In the next league, batters wait. They just stand there. They don't really do anything. They're hoping for something good to happen, like a walk. One is aggressive, one is passive. And the difference between those two levels of leagues of baseball is similar to the two levels of life that people live on. Some people are aggressive. They go out, they're going to make things happen. You know, they want to live life to its fullest. They throw themselves 100% into what they're doing. Other people are more passive. They're okay with drifting along, content with where they are. They don't get too bent out of shape or worked up about stuff. But when it comes to seemingly impossible situations, which of those best describes you? Are you aggressive? Are you optimistic? Or are you kind of defeated and resigned? Well, if you're a believer, a follower of Jesus Christ, God wants you to face even the most impossible of situations with courage and with confidence. And it's confidence not necessarily in yourself. What empowers us to do it is His presence in our lives, that we're not in it alone. Ephesians 6:10 says, "Be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power." Philippians 4:13, you know, says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." A third thought about how to face those red seas, those seemingly impossible situations that are in your life now or in the future, is just don't give up. Just be persistent. Don't ever give up. There's an old fable about when God was passing judgment on the devil. Satan says, "Please, Lord, if you decide to take away my powers, allow me to just keep one. Let me possess the power of discouragement, because with discouragement, I know I can defeat any person." One of the most powerful negative emotions that people struggle with is the feeling of discouragement, despondency. Now, you all know what quitting points are, don't you? We all do, because at some time or another, all of us have experienced deep disappointments, seemingly one setback after another, to where everything inside of us just says, what's the use? You know? And we give up and quit. And it's at those crossroads, it's at those quitting points where persistence is so important. You know, 35 years ago, I was a very young pastor leading a church, and a chain of events led to a few people deciding to leave our church in favor of a more traditional church format. And it just so happened that those were the people who actually had jobs in our church. Everyone else was real young and in college. And so when they left, our offerings dropped from an average of $1,623 a week down to $747. I still remember it. That's a decline of $876 a week, or more than half. What's more, the new treasurer guy, who himself was at business school at college at that time, took over the books and found out we were already $10,000 in debt. It wasn't hard to see the writing on the wall. It said, "The party is over." That's what the writing said. But I mean, seriously, we were in big trouble. The morale was low. But you know, with God's help and with a never say die attitude on the part of the core people, we were able to crash through that quitting point brought about by a situation that was kind of beyond our control. I look at our current situation that we talked about earlier. It's hard to know. It's hard for me to see a way. But I truly believe that with God's help, with persistence, faith on our part, it can and will happen. You know, they say that people under the age of 40, maybe even 50, are a part of what they call the instant generation. That our society has conditioned them, and us really, to expect instant success, instant solutions to our problems, instant financial freedom, instant marital bliss, instant everything. And when our expectations aren't met instantly with a minimal amount of effort, we give up. We quit jobs. We give up on educational pursuits. We give up on our goals. We give up on relationships. Sometimes we give up on God. The lack of persistence is a weakness common to the majority of people. People have goals and hopes and dreams that they never achieve because they allow problems and setbacks and difficult circumstances to cause them to give up and quit. Well, the truth I've learned is that the outcome of your life, to a large extent, will be determined by your ability or inability to display persistence in breaking through those quitting points, because they're going to come. Seemingly impossible situations, as we mentioned, in your marriage, in your career, financially, relationally, emotionally, with your family. You know, we all enjoy hearing stories about someone who has fought back from adversity and overcome insurmountable odds. People who have set high goals maybe and, paid the price to achieve them. But somehow we think we could never do something like that. Somebody else could, but we couldn't. You got to believe that with God's help, you can and you will overcome whatever insurmountable obstacles you may be currently facing or will in the future. Not on your own power, but by His mighty power at work within you. So how should we face the Red Seas? Or those situations that seem impossible that come into our lives? Number one, lean on God. Sometimes we say, well, I finally turned to God. That's the first thing. Not the last resort. That's the very first thing. Lean on God. Number two, do everything within your power with God's help to be optimistic, to believe. Even in the face of odds that look insurmountable, try to keep up your faith. And number three, simply don't give up. Because in God's time, which is the right time, perhaps after you've learned an important life lesson, perhaps it's after God used an adversity to bring about some change in your life, after you've grown closer to God than maybe you were, in God's time, He'll part the waters, you'll walk through, and your seemingly impossible situation will be in your rearview mirror. And you can know the next time that if God did it before, He's probably going to do it again.